according to health officials, and touting the Fed's plan to provide up to 125 million reusable masks to various school districts all around the country to ensure the health and safety of America's school-age kids. But getting more federal money into the hands of struggling parents and others remains elusive, at least for the time being. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi scoffed at Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin's overture to resume talks, writing in a statement that the White House is not budging from their position concerning the size and scope of a legislative package.
That's Fox's Kevin Cork. There'll be no redo of Puerto Rico's troubled primary election. Instead, the territory's highest court has ordered additional voting this Sunday at voting centers that never opened or ran out of ballots last weekend. America is listening to Fox News.
Mescla Dos opened its doors in 2010 and has been proudly serving the people of Guam for 10 amazing years. In celebration of their 10th anniversary, Mescla Dos will be offering 20% off on all burgers for a limited time only. Terms and conditions apply. Please call them at 646-6295 for more information, or visit them at their Upper Tumon location right across Kmart. Thank you, Guam, for making Mescla Dos one of your favorite hamburger spots.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
The Senate Homeland Security Committee probing the origins of the FBI Russia probe, facing criticism for not holding any hearings yet. But committee chair, Republican Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, telling Fox's The Story with Martha McCallum.
It was important to obtain documents before we bring witnesses in to testify. I mean, take a look at the testimony of Rob Rosenstein and Sally Yates. I mean, what was really accomplished out of that? Because they're pretty slippery, they don't recall things. So you really need the documents so you can really question these folks in a deposition.
Democrats claim the committee's investigation is politically motivated. Airbnb, for the first time, taking legal action against a guest for violating a ban on parties following an unauthorized party at a rental in the Sacramento area last weekend that left 3 people shot. The company seeking monetary damages from the guest and blocking them from using the site. Because the evidence against them is essentially the same, Minnesota's Attorney General Keith Ellison asking a court to combine the trials of the 4 Minneapolis police officers charged in George Floyd's death. Officer Derek Chauvin is charged with murdering Floyd, the others with aiding and abetting him for not stopping Chauvin from kneeling on Floyd's neck until he passed out and died. Sheriff's deputies in L.A. will soon be wearing body cameras.
Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva says finally they have struck a deal with a company called Axon to spend $25 million over 5 years on 5,200 body-worn cameras. The first of the cameras will go out to sheriff's personnel at 5 patrol stations by October 1st.
It has a recall, I think, of 1 minute that we programmed it for 1 minute. So it can recall back 1 minute. You won't get the audio, but you'll get the video 1 minute backwards from the time you hit the button.
Villanueva says every deputy is required to store the video at the end of their shift to the iCloud. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Top End Pest Control is who you call for all your pest control needs. Got a problem with roaches, ants, spiders, rodents, fleas, ticks, termites? No problem. They do it all. Top End Pest Control is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business and HubZone certified, serving Guam since 2012. Call them today for a quote, 487-5657, or email topendpest@gmail.com. Check them out on Facebook at Top End Pest Control and give them a like. Top End Pest Control for all your pest control needs.
$5 foot long. High with veggies.
They're back. Any foot long is a $5 foot long when you buy one at regular price. At participating locations, Subway, eat fresh.
Hofady, this is Kayla from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated team in Guam and the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 66 years. Tall Tales is also brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Every day, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I have to keep reminding everyone, including myself, that that is an important part of the United States Constitution. It's the Bill of Rights. Tall Tales is a program that is oriented towards the Bill of Rights, freedom, democracy, similar concepts. And we get into politics and social issues, both nationally and here on our beautiful island in the Western Pacific. So you've come to the right place. The first item on the agenda here for Tall Tales is what's called Zemi Ikotni. And this is that part of the program where I evaluate the editorial offerings of each of our daily newspapers, avidly look for mistakes in grammar and English usage, faulty editorial theories, and factual errors. And having exhausted that routine, I will then award the better of the two, the coveted Blue Star, which most of the time goes to the Post because the Daily News so seldom, if ever, submits an editorial. Today being no exception, today they ran something from Nikki Solis, a deputy public defender in San Francisco. She was a manager in the public defender's office when Kamala Harris served as San Francisco district attorney. She probably didn't have much work to do then. There weren't very many criminals to defend. And this is the title of what Nikki submitted to USA Today. Harris, the most progressive DA in California. Now, I suspect that Nikki expects that she's praising Kamala Harris, not for Tall Tales. Progressive is not a good label to hang on yourself if you want intelligent, tuned in, patriotic Americans to support you in the electoral process. So no surprise, the Daily News, being a Gannett newspaper, is very, very progressive, which means left-wing. And then we have the Post. And today, the Post just seems to be fixated on not opening the schools. I think this is their fourth editorial on the schools. And it's entitled, School Campuses Should Stay Closed Until Wuhan Virus Spikes Ease. When in doubt, err on the side of caution. When in doubt, err on the side of caution. I put that almost in the same category as I put the phrase let's give them the benefit of the doubt. How often do we do that on Tall Tales, Real Joe Cruz?
Like almost never, sir.
Yeah. When in doubt, err on the side of caution. That's what we as individuals would tend to do when we face risk. And our instinct, I'll come back to that word too. I better circle these so I don't forget them. Our instinct tells us to hold off until it's safe to proceed with an action. And yet, when it comes to the nearly 9,000 public school students who have opted in-person learning, the Guam Education Board failed to put on the brakes on what could be a train wreck of possible Wuhan virus cases spreading in our schools among students and among immune-compromised teachers and other school staff in the middle of a spike in Wuhan virus cases locally. Opening the classrooms isn't just opening the campuses. Parents will be out and about buying school lunches and snacks at grocery or mom and pop stores before the school day starts. They would never do that when there's no school. Absolutely not. Many will take trips more often to the gas station. And there will be stops for more school supplies at certain stores. Teachers will also need to do some errands related to their job in the classrooms, and some of these errands will involve going to stores for supplies. Boy, it just scares the heck out of me. Gas stations, stores, snacks. It's just a miracle that, when you drive outside, you just don't see the street lined with corpses. There will be a lot of running around to meet the demands of teaching and attending school in physical classrooms. I don't know if there's any other kind but a physical classroom. The Education Board met on Tuesday and discussed delaying opening of our public schools. Education Board members Mark Mendiola, James Lujan, and John Birch voted to delay the opening of the new school year, which is scheduled to start on August 17. Mendiola said there's a lot of anxiety in the community. We're talking about our kids, and we're also got to look at our employees. We're putting them in harm's way, Mendiola said. Lohan said the number of positive cases looked more optimistic when the Education Board first made its decision at the beginning of the school year. The latest numbers require caution, he added. Birch made the motion to delay the school year by 1 week to August 24, also citing a need for extra time for teachers who will be entering a school year unlike any year before. Distance learning, he mentioned, has not been applied in this magnitude before. Education Board Chairwoman Maria Gutierrez was a lead voice in sticking to August 17. Lourdes Benavente, Felitas Angel, Carolyn Bora, and Ronald McNinch. I wonder is this the Ronald McNinch? Yeah. Ronald McNinch voted yes. Right now, we cannot guarantee everything. Everybody has anxiety, Gutierrez said at one point. But with all the work that has been done, we gave the responsibility to the superintendent and his team. It's our responsibility now to give him our support. Regardless of the amount of preparation that has been set in motion, the main deciding factor should be the safety of the school children, teachers, and school staff. As we were writing this editorial, news broke that COVID, as your Wuhan virus case, was identified at Simon Sanchez High School as it prepares to open. Just to be clear, we're not asking for a total cancellation of in-person learning for the school year. It's necessary for us as a community to begin efforts to return, here we go again, to near, guess what word they're using here?
Normalcy.
Yeah.
Weak, sir.
You know, you work with them, you tutor them, you try to bring them along. Almost every day they use that word. It's normality, Guam Daily Post. But there have also been alarming numbers of Wuhan virus infections over the past week that should prompt a pause on the opening of the new school year. Schools should be given some time, possibly 2 weeks, for the spike in Wuhan virus cases to ease and for schools to better prepare themselves for Wuhan virus safety precautions. Our community in general has been responsible on the following the mask-wearing rule, although adherence to social distancing needs some work, as seen in a lot of places, like the poker party down at Umatic, that the governor's office all of a sudden didn't know anything about. They didn't know who any of those people were, etc. Okay, we get to prepare our schools to be safer. That's not a lot to ask. If we are okay with closing bars for 2 weeks, we shouldn't take issue with delaying the opening of schools for the same amount of time. This is one of the silliest sentences I've seen in an editorial since I've been doing semi-ecotany. I think it bears another reading. If we are okay with closing bars for 2 weeks, we shouldn't take issue with delaying the opening of schools for the same amount of time. Yeah, that's a really good parallel. How many kids go to school in bars, Real Joe Cruz?
None, sir.
None. Yeah.
None.
How much alcohol do they serve in the schools?
0, sir.
Yeah. I don't see the parallel here. The safety of 4,134 elementary school students, 2,241 middle school students, and 2,038 high school students who have opted to learn in physical classrooms is on the line. Now, let's go back to the very beginning here. When in doubt, err on the side of caution. That's what our instinct tells us to hold off until it's safe to proceed with an action. I don't want people running schools to act based on their instinct. No. Everybody that, the school board, the superintendent, the governor, the lieutenant governor, on and on, they all have an intellect. So we don't have to operate on our instincts. Instincts mean those things that are hardwired into us as sentient mammals. The two strongest instincts that human beings have is self-preservation and propagation of the race. Now, obviously, we don't let those two basic instincts govern every single thing that we do every day. I would hope for a thought process. I would hope for analysis, careful planning, incisiveness. And I think maybe it would be interesting to find a candidate who would run for the legislature. Please vote for me because I'm going to follow my instincts when I get into the legislature. I'm not going to read the bills. I'm not going to engage in any kind of a thought process. I will just follow my instincts, he said. Now, let's go back to the first sentence here. When in doubt, err on the side of caution. You know, if I were to do that, if I had been doing that all my life, I would still be standing on the curb in Wisconsin Avenue in Milwaukee, because there was a lot of traffic on Wisconsin Avenue in Milwaukee when I was 12, and one had to be careful when he crossed the street. But if I had stood there until there was absolutely no traffic in either direction, I'd still be standing there. So somehow I made it across the street without getting hit by a car. How did I do that? I observed the traffic coming from either direction. I estimated the approximate speed. I calculated how long it would take me to cross the street. I entered into some other calculations to figure out when I should how far the cars would have to be before I could step off the curb and cross the street in an accelerated fashion and make it across the street before a car came along. When in doubt, err on the side of caution. You know, if everyone followed that, the world would come to a standstill. Life is a risk. Almost everything that we do is a risk. But what we have to do is we have to compare the benefit of taking the risk against the detriment of not taking the risk. I keep reading stuff about how injurious it is to kids to not go to school, to be locked up all the time. I even went to school myself, and I used to really look forward to going to school. I learned some things when I went to school. I learned a whole lot more at school than I could have ever learned from my mother and father. May they rest in peace. They were nice people. They were a product of their times, but they weren't teachers. So we have this profession called teachers who spend their professional lives trying to figure out how to get knowledge inside the heads of children. And we've, in a sense, built our society around getting that knowledge in the heads of children. We keep saying, you know, an educated populace is necessary for a successful community. And then we go through this, well, when in doubt, err on the side of caution. Our instincts tell us to hold off until it's safe to proceed with an action. Yeah, so we have a physicians committee. We have a Department of Public Health and Social Services. We gather data. We gather information. We started out with what were called models, which meant something like educated computerized guesses. And we found out that most of the models were wrong. We were supposed to have 7,000 dead people by now. We've got 5. So the models were wrong. But if we're not going to have school, and I mean real school, I don't mean computers or take the books home or something like that, I mean real school, then we have to have some really high-powered analysis. This is an extremely serious matter to deal with, and it should not be brushed away with a err on the side of caution or instinctive instincts. So, once again, I'm on the opposite side from the Post here, and as a matter of editorial theory. And then, of course, I have to go back here and be a little bit picky here. Normalcy. Why don't you change your autocomplete or your search and replace so that it automatically replaces normalcy with normality? And then the logical flaw here. Well, if we're okay with closing bars for 2 weeks, we shouldn't take issue with delaying the opening of schools for the same amount of time. And then this borderline demagoguery here in the last paragraph, setting out numbers, 4,134, 2,241, 2,038, and then safety is on the line. In other words, a kind of an editorial talk. Right, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. In other words, if this doesn't work out right, we have our I told you so chit filed in the editorial boardroom, and we're going to bring that chit out and publish it right in the paper, and we're going to say, we told you so. And then, of course, at the beginning here, err on the side of caution, instinct, etc. So the rules for Jemmy Ecotney are that if the host of Tall Tales doesn't really like your editorial, that doesn't mean that you can't get the blue star. If it's properly constructed, edgy, deals with an important subject, has a good punchline and a call to action, you can still win. That's not this editorial. No blue star today. Now, if it makes you feel any better over there at the editorial boardroom, the what is it called? One of those acronyms for the folks who make these decisions, came out this morning and said, we're suspending the opening of school till August 31. So Guam Daily Post, they're doing what you want them to do. And I suppose what happened was that somebody was up at 2 o'clock this morning, looked at the e-edition of the Post and said, the Post said we shouldn't open. We better hold off for 2 weeks because they're trusting their instincts. And, we better err on the side of caution here. So no school until August 31st. I really feel sorry for the kids. There are some things in life that are perishable. Some things, if you don't do it today, you can do it tomorrow. It doesn't make much difference. If you want to go to a really good John Wayne movie tonight, and for some reason you can't go, you can probably go next week. It'll be the same movie. Everything will kind of come out the same. But these days that the kids are missing in school, there's no way that they'll ever get them back. So those kids are, I don't want to say handicapped or disabled or anything, as heavy duty as that. I'll just go along with shortchanged. They're being shortchanged right now, and they'll never get those coins back. And that has to weigh heavily in this process instead of tossing around, it's better to be safe than sorry. And, if we're going to close the bars down for 2 weeks, we shouldn't complain about closing the schools down for 2 weeks, too. Okay, that's Jemmy Ecotney for today. And let's take a short break. Let me catch my breath here.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer staycation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,900 by calling Family Finance. Agana 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo at 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
time. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties, doing real estate since 1978. 14 years here on Guam. Call Maria Miller from Horizon Properties at 777-7792.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, well, here's something that's not quite so controversial on the card. Yesterday, I mentioned to you that the Supreme Court had ruled in a case called DFS versus the airport. It's a 78-page ruling, and I said I would have to spend some time digesting it before I could speak about it. Fortunately for us, the airport has put out a release as to at least what they think the import of the case is, and it ran in the Daily News. And it says the High Court addressed several motions and claims. The Supreme Court directed the trial court to enter judgment in favor of the airport on two of DFS's claims in the first protest complaint. DFS asserted in its first procurement complaint that members of the airport board improperly received gifts from Lotte during the procurement process. I think we all remember that. The airport board took a trip to Korea and were given some like expensive purses or something like that, which they gave back. Something of a kerfuffle, though, in the process. DFS asserted in its first procurement complaint that members of the board, airport board, improperly received gifts from Lotte during the procurement process. On the indisputed facts before the court found the claims were barred as a matter of law because they were untimely protested. So there are timelines in the procurement law. If you don't do something in a timely fashion, you lose the ability to protest. The trial court below awarded DFS summary judgment on its third procurement protest complaint, but in light of the court's decision on the questions of administrative exhaustion and timeliness of claims under the procurement code, the court vacated the award of summary judgment, so issues of timeliness and administrative exhaustion in the third protest complaint could be considered by the trial court. On the merits of the airport's summary judgment motion on DFS second procurement protest complaint, the court affirmed the trial court's decision to deny the airport's summary judgment on DFS's third protest complaint. In each of its three protest complaints, DFS asserted the airport violated the automatic stay provision of the procurement code by entering into a contract with Lotte while litigation was still pending. The Supreme Court opined the complaints were not barred nor moot. The Supreme Court nullified the trial court's final judgment and sent the case back with directions that further proceedings be consistent with the Supreme Court's opinion. So let's go to our law and order notebooks here, Real Joe Cruz. So if you were to take the time to read that opinion, you would find that the Supreme Court decided some things, said it couldn't decide other things, and sent those matters back to the Superior Court. So, a layman would wonder, well, if it's in front of the Supreme Court and they're the highest court, shouldn't they just decide those things? Why are they sending them back to the Superior Court? And there's the reason why. In our system, and it's pretty much the American system, we have trial courts. Trial courts take testimony. They hear witnesses. Documents are introduced into evidence that have the proper foundation. A judge will, the parties file motions, judges rule on the motions. If there's a jury trial, at the end of the trial, the jury is what's called the fact finder. the judge will issue instructions to the jury, and the jury will will make rulings as to what happened or what didn't happen during the trial. If there's no jury, then the trial judge makes those findings. I was going to say, no. The trial judge makes those findings themselves, right? So when the case, then if a case is appealed to the Supreme Court, if there aren't proper factual foundations for some of the court's decisions, that case might get remanded back to the trial court. If the trial court didn't consider everything that it should have considered, back to the trial court. If the trial court considered things that it shouldn't have, back to the trial court, because the Supreme Court does not take testimony. It doesn't take evidence. You can't have an impassioned person telling the Supreme Court, "They stole my money, please, court, get my money back for me." The Supreme Court only examines the papers that arise from the trial court, from the court below, and that's it. No witnesses, no testimony, no fact-fighting. So when the record suggests that the trial court needs to do more work, the case goes back. An awful lot of the DFS versus airport case was sent back to the trial court. I suspect it's going to be a couple more years before we see an end to that very important litigation. Okay, next on my calendar here, you remember yesterday I was talking about Lori Lightfoot and Black Lives Matter and how looting was just going out of this world in Chicago, how people weren't even being surreptitious about it. They weren't sneaking up the stores and slipping in and carrying out TVs and running away. They were actually backing their cars up to the stores, coming in there with U-Haul trailers. 100 arrests, 14 police officers were wounded in the process. And it was just obvious that anarchy had taken over the place. So about the same thing is going on in Portland. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Portland, about Warren Wilhelm Jr., Rudy Giuliani, order maintenance, and the broken windows theory of policing. So I start out here with, with Portland, and the title of this item on the card is The Schmidt List versus Order Maintenance. Portland, Oregon District Attorney Mike Schmidt says his office will not prosecute protesters who have been charged with low-level offenses. In a statement detailing the new policy released on Tuesday, Schmidt noted the protests have been ongoing since the death of George Floyd on May 25. The statement reads, quote, "The demands for change go beyond a call for an end to police violence and encompass the need for us all to acknowledge and address centuries of racism and oppression." This is not one of the protesters now. This is the district attorney. This is the chief prosecutor for Portland. As prosecutors, we acknowledge the depth of emotion that motivates the demonstrations and support those who are civically engaged through peaceful protesting. Now, if you've seen any of the videos of what's going on in Portland, you know how peaceful it is. When they light a fire in the middle of the street, it's a peaceful fire. They're out there roasting marshmallows on that fire. We recognize that we will undermine public safety, not promote it, if we leverage the force of our criminal justice system against peaceful protesters who are demanding to be heard. Schmidt argues that prosecutors need not only, as your prosecutors, not only need to, quote, advance the safety of our community, but also promote economic and housing stability, educational opportunities, strong family and community relationships, and the mental and physical health of all those who live in our country. Did you know that that's what prosecutors did, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
You did?
Yeah.
You know, I never knew that. You know, in all my years in law school, the prosecutors I knew, I thought their job was to prosecute people who had broken the law. But here we have this guy Schmidt saying that the job of a prosecutor is to promote economic and housing stability, educational opportunities, strong family and community relationships, and the mental and physical health of all those who live in our county. Boy, that sounds like a big job.
Sounds like a personal shtick, Mr. Schmidt.
Dick, yeah. And then Mr. Schmidt went on to say, seen through that lens, the prosecution of cases relating solely to protest activities, most of which have a weak nexus to further criminality and which are unlikely to be deterred by prosecution, draws away from crucially needed resources. As stewards of the public resources, we must devote our efforts to prosecuting crimes that allow us to protect our most vulnerable victims, to have the greatest impact on promoting a safer community for everyone in Multnomah County. Now, these guys are elected. He was elected. I just wonder if this is the kind of campaign speech he makes. If he does, well, folks in Multnomah County, you know, the old saying is, people get the kind of government they deserve. Schmidt added that his office would presumptively decline to charge cases where the most serious offenses are city ordinance violations and crimes that do not involve deliberate property damage, theft, or the use or threat of force against a person. He outlined those charges: interference with a police officer. These are the ones he's not going to prosecute. Interference with a police officer, disorderly conduct, criminal trespass, escape 3, harassment, or riot. Additionally, Schmidt said the charges of resisting arrest or assaulting a public safety officer should be subjected to a high level of scrutiny. Smith said officials should consider whether the officer had probable cause for the arrest, if the defendant was recently subjected to tear gas or other less lethal force, or if they, the defendant, right? The defendant, or if they were otherwise in pain or unable to hear, breathe, or see at the moment the arrest or alleged assault occurred. Additionally, Schmidt said officials should consider if the, quote, act of resistance was unreasonably severe. So it's okay to resist a cop if your resistance is not unreasonably severe. And for charges of assaulting a police officer, officials should determine if there is, quote, adequate documentation of the specific cause of injury and the severity of the injury. Portland Police Chief Chuck Lavelle said his department will continue to arrest those who violate the law. I guess he's not going to be concerned with housing and all the rest of that stuff. Committing a crime is different from demonstrating. The arrests we make often come after hours of damage to private property, disruption of public transit, safety on public streets, thefts from small businesses, arson, burglary, attacks on members of the community, and attacks against police officers. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Kamala Harris was the most progressive DA in California. Yeah. So anyhow, that's this guy, Mike Schmidt in Portland. Now I want to talk a little bit about Warren Wilhelm Jr. and Rudy Giuliani. And I have to tell you, I'm going to could I have your leave to brag for a second, Real Joe Cruz?
Sure, sir.
I shook and howdy with Rudy Giuliani.
You don't say.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was back in a little autobiography here. In 2008, I went back to Cleveland, Ohio to work in John McCain's campaign. And I worked in what was called the Brecksville Center. We did a lot of telephone banking. I chauffeured people around, etc. And I went to another town with the guy with the mayor of Brecksville to attend one of Rudy's events. Now, I was introduced to Rudy, and the mayor gave me a really good rep about how hard I was working and how valuable I was to the center and stuff like that. So thank you very much. So then Rudy came to the Brecksville Center about a month later, and he came in about 7 o'clock at night. And he came in, we were in a very strange place in the back of a shopping center. And I was not far from the door. I was pretty close to the door that Rudy came in. So Rudy was with another person, and Rudy opened the door, came in, looked around, saw me, came right over to me, shook hands, and said, "Nice to see you again, Bob." Whoa.
Wow, remembered your name.
Yeah, and all the other volunteers were saying, "Whoa."
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my Rudy Giuliani story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say he was looking at you for some Rico.
I only shook and howdied with him. I didn't pick his pocket, Real Joe.
Oh, I see. Isn't he the man that took down the mob?
He did, yeah. And he did that. And also, when he was mayor of New York, you know, I've been going back and forth to New York for quite a while. And Times Square at one time was just a hellhole. It was skin flicks and seedy bars and a lot of street people, and it was just not very impressive at all. When you consider it's kind of the heart of the capital of the whole world. But Rudy Giuliani really cleaned it up. I was back there with my grandchildren a couple of times, and for them, just to go down there at night and walk around Times Square was exciting. It's a wonderful place now, but it had been a hellhole, and Rudy Giuliani cleaned it up. In fact, he cleaned up New York and made it a place where you could live again. And one of the things that he did is called broken windows policing. And the theory behind broken windows policing is this: if there is a neighborhood and buildings in the neighborhood have broken windows, if you stroll through that neighborhood, you'll think people don't care much about their property in this neighborhood. You know, if a window, obviously it's people break windows, you can do that, and there must not be much of a penalty of pay, and then the windows never get fixed. Well, gosh, I remember how I used to like to break windows when I was a kid. Pick up a rock and throw it at the window. So the theory is that the signs of the deterioration of a neighborhood create an unconscious sort of feeling amongst people in that neighborhood that people don't care much about order maintenance here. Order maintenance means that, you know, people don't park their car on the sidewalk, as an example, and people don't throw their trash all over the street. Boy, already. Okay, let's take a short break here. We'll come back to broken windows policing.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch! That's just what we did with our new state-of-the-art mobile banking app as we celebrate 66 years of serving our island communities. It's loaded with a ton of new user-friendly features, including remote deposit capture. It's another way of saying you don't have to come to the bank to go to the bank. And if you want to come to the bank, we're happy to see your smiling face as long as you wear a mask. And we don't have long lines. Bank Pacific, Rosebud branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. They are open in Agana, ready for dine-in, takeout, and delivery services from Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call them 479-2652 and get your Mezcla fix today.
So let's see, where was I? Broken windows. So when Rudy Giuliani was the mayor, he had the cops enforce what some would consider minor traffic violations. And this was the broken windows is kind of analogous to that. So, if it appears that the cops are not going to enforce minor violations, then people would think, well, I guess that, there isn't much law and order here. I can get away with even more serious stuff. And by employing this broken windows theory of policing, the crime rate came way, way down in New York. I mentioned Times Square turned from an urban dump into a really exciting, interesting place. And Rudy cleaned it up pretty well. It didn't last long after he was gone. We now have a mayor in New York whose name is Warren Wilhelm Jr. At least that was his name when he was born. Now, we won't, I think he's a male, but of course, that's a tough one too, right? Warren Wilhelm Jr., but he decided that name didn't have enough pizzazz and didn't have enough ethnic appeal in a city like New York. I mean, who would want to wander around with a boring German name? Ich bin Wilhelm, mein Herr. Yeah. So he changed his name from Warren Wilhelm Jr. to Bill de Blasio. So now you know where Bill de Blasio came from, Real Joe Cruz. Bill de Blasio. And he has gone exactly the opposite of broken window. See, I would suspect that what Bill de Blasio does is he has city street workers hand out buckets of small pebbles and encourage people to break windows with it because he's let his city turn into absolute chaos. I just saw an article this morning that New York City, Manhattan, may never recover. The damage that Warren Wilhelm has done here may be so severe that New York will never recover. And that appears to be what's going on in Cleveland with a guy like this Mike Schmidt. Oh, yeah, they're out there, they're rioting and they're looting and all that stuff. But, we have a higher calling than that. We shouldn't be arresting these people, hurting their feelings, etc. Rather than do that, we've got to promote economic and housing stability, educational opportunities, strong family and community relationships, and the mental and physical health of those who live in our country. So, you know, when you got a guy like Mike Schmidt, who is the prosecutor in Portland, and Warren Wilhelm Jr., you know, what can you say about someone who can't even be honest about their own name, right? Klitzkie does not have a whole lot of pizzazz, right?
A little bit, sir.
A little bit? Yeah. So, you know, but it's the name, it's my name, and by God, I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to change it for some political reason to something that has more pizzazz or more ethnic appeal or something like that. It's dishonest. But that's Warren Wilhelm Jr., also known as Bill de Blasio. And these guys are running their cities into the ground. The mayor of Chicago finally woke up, but it may be too late. You know, once you get past a certain point, you stop to think about it. The veneer of civilization can be very thin. So you can have a good police force in a city like Chicago, but 1,000 people could take over any part of Chicago if they wanted to, and there wouldn't be anything the cops could do about it. So the idea, you know, the broken windows idea, is you just don't let these things get started, and you don't let them get out of hand. But of course, that's exactly what the radical left is trying to do and has been quite successful in doing. The Black Lives Matter. You know, all in the name of a good cause. But what it really is a neo-Marxist anarchist group that wants to destroy the country. And they're being quite successful at it. And they're being aided and abetted by the likes of Warren Wilhelm Jr. and Bill de Blasio and Mike Schmidt and the governor of Washington and the mayor of Seattle and the governor of Oregon, etc. They're just playing right into the hands of the people that want to ruin this country forever. But I'm sure they feel good about themselves because, you know, George Floyd and racism, and they don't want to be accused of being racist, and Black Lives Matter, and we can see that it's effective and infectious, as a matter of fact, so infectious that a group of doctors were stricken right here in Guam, and we're down at Skinner Plaza taking the knee for a group called White Coats for Black Lives Matter. Yeah. It's really kind of disappointing, and it makes you wonder, where is this country going to go? Where is it going? And it doesn't seem like there's an easy answer to this. The answer, well, I'll come back after the halftime show, and I'll tell you what I think the answer is.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The Biden-Harris ticket speaks. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Former Vice President Joe Biden appearing for the first time yesterday with his running mate, saying he made the right choice.
I have no doubt that I picked the right person to join me as the next Vice President of the United States of America, and that's Senator Kamala Harris.
Senator Harris, who back in April said she believed women who'd made sexual misconduct allegations against Biden, responding,
As I said, Joe, when you called me, I am incredibly honored by this responsibility, and I'm ready to get to work.
Senator Harris blamed President Trump for the recession triggered by the coronavirus pandemic. Vice President Mike Pence reacting to the selection of his opponent on Fox's Hannity.
Joe Biden's decision to add Kamala Harris to the ticket confirms everything President Trump and I have been saying, and that is that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party have been overtaken by the radical left.
And the vice president says he's looking forward to the vice presidential candidates debate in October in Salt Lake City. President Trump at a White House briefing blaming Democrats for the stalled coronavirus relief talks.
The president began by recognizing stock market gains, then segued into criticism of Democratic leaders.
Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are holding the American people hostage over money for their radical left-wing agenda.
He said that includes billions for mail-in voting. He says, without specifics, is rife with fraud. As for COVID numbers in hotspot states, the president said it's greatly improved.
Some with very little, if any, problem. Large portions of the United States.
He again called for schools to reopen, saying young people can fight off the virus much better.
Fox's Gernal Scott. America is listening to Fox News.
Five, four, three, two, one, launch! That's just what we did with our new state-of-the-art mobile banking app as we celebrate 66 years of serving our island communities. It's loaded with a ton of new user-friendly features, including remote deposit capture. It's another way of saying you don't have to come to the bank to go to the bank. And if you want to come to the bank, we're happy to see your smiling face as long as you're wearing a mask. And we don't have long lines. Bank Pacific Rosebud branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Klitzkie opened its doors in 2010 and has been proudly serving the people of Guam for 10 amazing years. In celebration of their 10th anniversary, Klitzkie will be offering 20% off on all burgers for a limited time only. Terms and conditions apply. Please call them at 646-6295 for more information, or visit them at their Upper Tumon location right across Kmart. Thank you, Guam, for making Klitzkie one of your favorite hamburger spots.
Another night of protests in Portland. Fires set outside and fireworks launched at the courthouse in Portland. A few minutes ago, police declaring it an unlawful assembly and ordering protesters to disperse. 2 police officers in Indianapolis now facing charges over the way they dealt with protesters in that city.
A grand jury has indicted 2 Indianapolis police officers on battery and multiple felony charges after 2 women accused them of excessive force in late May. One seen on video resisting police before 2 officers deployed batons. One of the officers also seen pushing another woman to the ground who tried to intervene. The incident after a city-imposed curfew and followed a string of looting, destruction, and violence.
When we're talking about issues of reasonableness, that's very much a standard that's going to be defined by the community. What better way to define that than by presenting it to a grand jury?
Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears, the officers remain on paid leave, pending an internal investigation. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The 4 Minneapolis police officers charged in George Floyd's death should be tried at the same time, according to Minnesota's Attorney General Keith Ellison, asking a judge to combine the trials because the evidence against them is similar, and a single trial would spare family members the trauma of multiple trials. Officer Derek Chauvin is charged with murder, the 3 others with aiding and abetting in Floyd's death. Attorneys for the only Native American on federal death row asking a federal court to delay his scheduled execution later this month, while they argue the execution protocol the feds follow should match Arizona's, where the crimes were committed. Lesmond Mitchell was convicted of beheading a 63-year-old woman and her 9-year-old granddaughter back in 2001. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day,
This is Michelle from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam and on the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
They're back. Any footlong is a $5 footlong when you buy one at regular price. At participating locations, Subway, eat fresh.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumont or call 646-1463.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are back in Tall Tales after that big halftime show that we've all come to know and love so well. During the first half, I spent some time talking about the absolute insanity that has taken over some of our American cities like Portland, Seattle, and New York, and how public officials, elected officials, are pandering to the worst elements of our society, the neo-Marxists, inspired anarchists and looters and rioters who are tearing these cities apart. And we heard Mike Schmidt, the prosecutor in Multnomah County, spit out this ridiculous rap. Kind of like, well, we have to be kind to our criminals. We've got to make sure they've got nice housing, and it would, if Peter Sellers, may he rest in peace, were alive, he could make a dynamite movie out of what's going on in Portland, because he could be so sarcastic and so facetious and come across like real people, like they are acting in these American cities. And I said before the halftime break that it almost appears to be insoluble, but here's what has to happen. Every single one of us, everyone out there in the international radio listening audience, has to kind of take a broken windows policing approach to life. And we can't let these minor quote, slights go by without speaking up. So when you see this kind of stuff, and unfortunately it hasn't arrived here yet, we haven't had our local separatists enlist any rioters or looters or arsonists to come over here and help them demonstrate. And let's hope that it never happens. But when we encounter identity politics and the messages of the left, we have to abandon our comfort zones and say, hey, time out. That's not right. I want you to listen to something. That is not right. This Black Lives Matter thing is not about something that you did wrong that you have to personally fix. In fact, it's not about something you can fix at all, because it's got nothing to do with black people and with racism. It's got everything to do with neo-Marxism, anarchy, and the destruction of the American state as we know it. So every one of us has to go out and proselytize to the extent that we can, with the people that we know, the people that we run into, so that when we hear some of this Black Lives Matter or separatist propaganda based on identity politics, you got to speak up and say, hey, I want you to listen. Because until we do, until, a critical mass of us do, we're just rolling over and letting them have it. It's not going to work out for us very well. Okay, I'm going to go back into the card, but I peeked at Facebook comments during the break, and I noticed our old friend Brad Hewitt is back. Let's give Brad a big hand, Real Joe Cruz. Is that the biggest hand we could give him? Yeah, I want him to be able to hear that all the way in San Antonio. And here's what Brad wants to chime in on the Wuhan virus, and he says, so Lou is considering, as you were overreacting by putting Guam in PCDR1, what a bunch of nonsense. Forget the positive cases. What is more important is the positive percentage on a daily, weekly, biweekly, or monthly basis. Goal is to be less than 10%. Texas, for example, is over 20%. If Guam was that bad, I'd understand the fear. But Guam is very much under the 10% possibility take. So everyone needs to chill. Well, the governor needs to chill. But I'm afraid the governor has drunk that, it's better to be safe than sorry Kool-Aid, and sees an advantage in overreacting. Kind of playing damage control before the damage occurs. So if I'm really conservative, and even if something goes south on me, I can say, I was really, really conservative. So you can't hang it on me. Now, the 35,000 people that are out of work and the 29,000 kids that can't go to school, well, it's better to be safe than sorry. So I agree with you 100%, Brad, and thank you very much for chiming in with a little bit of that there Texas wisdom, boy. Some fellas down in Texas ain't going to horse around. Okay, next on the card is Kamala Harris versus Catholics. Of course, the internet has just been full of the fact that Joe Biden has chosen, what did he say? He announced that, what did he say yesterday? Well, I want everybody out there to know that I've chosen my running mate, and her name is, I've chosen my running mate. He sometimes has a little difficulty, like the time he thought his wife was his sister. Anyhow, he's chosen Kamala Harris, and sweet lemons and sour grapes are in abundance. Some people say it's the greatest possible gift that you could give to Donald Trump, because she will make a beatable Biden even more beatable, because she brings a lot of baggage to Biden's campaign. That some Democrats are saying she's too much a part of the Democrat establishment. She's not radical enough for us. And then there are a lot of Democrats who are afraid to talk anymore. But if they could, they'd say, this is not the Democrat Party that I know, far too liberal. But those Democrats have been silenced I've mentioned this once before. It bears going into again. A real staunch Democrat is what you call a yellow dog Democrat. Did I ever tell you about that, real Joe Cruz?
I vaguely
Yeah. So a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat is going to tell you that he is a yellow dog Democrat. And what he's trying to tell you there is that he'd vote for a yellow dog if he knew that yellow dog was a Democrat. But then the other stripe of a Democrat is the blue dog Democrat, who was a sort of liberal or moderate Democrat. But those are all gone. I think that's an endangered species, if not extinct by now. So even within the Democrats, Harris has drawn some fire. But, of course, she plays right into the identity politics of the Democrats. Joe Biden said, my vice president's going to be a woman. And then a couple days ago, a group of leaders in the African-American Democrat community sent him a note to Joe saying, Joe, if you don't pick a black woman for you lieutenant governor, you're not going to get our support. So what else could he do? So he picked Kamala Harris. And I could give you some really good reasons not to vote for Kamala Harris. There's one that's just good enough for me. Of course, when I talk about who I'm going to vote for, et cetera, like all of us, I tend to forget that none of us are going to be voting. We're going to vote, but nobody's going to pay attention to the ballots we cast. So I guess when I talk about who I would vote for, I mean who I would support and who I wouldn't support. About the only thing you can do from here is you can send a check to someone that you want to support, or not send a check to somebody you don't want to support. But let me come back and tell you that, that there's a single game stalker that I don't have to go past to find the other umpty-umph reasons not to support Kamala Harris. But before I do that, we have a caller on the line, real Joe Cruz. I believe it's the most dangerous man. The most dangerous man in the room. As he hung up his trench coat, put his hat on the hat rack and picked up the telephone to address his fan base out here in Tall Tales. Good afternoon, Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Yeah, I on my tool belt, of my most dangerous man tool belt, I have my curiosity pills, and whenever I see something that is sparks curiosity, I take one of my curiosity pills. That helps empower me to go find answers. But I just wanted to comment about this picking of Kamala Harris. Dinesh D'Souza posted a couple of really kind of biting tweets about this. One of them reads, Kamala Harris's mom is Asian Indian. Her dad, Donald Harris, is by his own account descended from one of the largest slave planters in Jamaica. In what sense can she claim the African-American experience of being descended from slaves and subject to segregation and Jim Crow? And there's another one here in which he actually posts the documents listing, says here are the names of the 200-plus slaves owned by Kamala Harris' ancestor, Hamilton Brown, in Jamaica in 1817. One of the largest planters in Jamaica, Brown now has a town named after him, Brownstown. So just tremendous irony. Using identity politics, as an African American, while at the same time having had ancestors who owned over 200 plus slaves in Jamaica in the 1800s. Tremendous irony in that, I think.
Very ironic, Carl.
Yes, yes. And I just thought I'd chime in about that since one thing that, causes me to bring these things forward is that I had a chat with one of my Facebook friends in which they kind of took offense at my using the term leftist, and they found that offensive. And I commented the reason why I do that is because that people on the opposition repeatedly smear tens of millions of innocent people with the racist label. All Republicans are racist, all conservatives are racist, all white people are racist, and on and on and on. It just never ends. So I think that's fair to bring these things up. The left is always on the attack. They are never on the defensive. They're always on the attack. So I think this is fair to bring these things up. Anyway, that's just my contribution for today, at least for now, Bob.
Well, it's a good contribution, and yeah. So Kamala Harris, the person of color, right, who is going to appeal to African Americans, is a descendant of people who owned 200 slaves.
Yes, yeah, and Dinesh D'Souza actually tweeted a document showing the names, the 200 plus names of the actual slaves. This isn't just accusations. This is documented. So yes, that is very true.
Well,
it will be interesting the next 2 months. She's got a lot of baggage, and there's going to be 2 months of unpacking a lot of baggage.
Really? Okay.
Bob.
Thank you very much, Carl. Kamala Harris, here's a real game stopper for me. This is something I picked up from the Federalist, and this goes to the confirmation of a person appointed as a federal judge, a man named Brian, one of these unpronounceable German names, Buescher. Brian Buescher. They used his membership in the charity Knights of Columbus, a Catholic fraternal service order, as a reason he was unqualified to serve as a federal judge. The beliefs of Knights of Columbus align directly with the positions of the Catholic Church. I think everybody on Guam knows what the Knights of Columbus is, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir. Fancy outfits, big hats, swords.
Lots of feathers.
Yeah. Special skills at taking out other men. Oh, no. They don't do that, right?
No,
Okay.
They don't do that. Yeah. So, and then she paired up with Mazie Hirono. If you remember Mazie Hirono from the confirmation hearings of Judge Kavanaugh, when she said that when it was he said, she said, she told Kavanaugh that she couldn't believe what he said about his account of what Ballsy Ford said. She said, I've looked at your decisions and I can't believe you. In other words, anyone who is ideologically on a different page must be a liar, according to Mazie Hirono, senator from Hawaii. So when Senator Mazie Hirono, Harris questioned whether membership in a group with Catholic theology as a basis for ideals would prevent him from being an objective and good judge. Hirono asked if he would be willing to leave the Knights of Columbus should he become a federal judge, in order to distance himself from, quote, their extreme positions. Knights of Columbus extreme positions. Those extreme positions are the same that guide the Catholic Church, in which more than 1 in 5 Americans are members. Harris dug into the beliefs of the Knights of Columbus, asking, were you aware that the Knights of Columbus opposed a woman's right to choose when you joined that organization? Wow. That's pretty heavy duty. Her insinuation that membership in an organization, and they're using the word pro-life here, I'm going to change it to what it should really be. Her insinuation that membership in an organization that is anti-abortion should be relevant to whether one could be an effective judge is absurd. She further expressed distaste for the group's disagreement with same-sex marriage. Both Harris and Hirono used Buescher's membership in a religious service organization, and by extension his faith, as a reason he ought not to hold public office. Now there's a section in the Constitution that says there shall be no religious test to hold any office under the United States. I was looking for it. I should have looked it up before the program started, but I'll find it later on and bring it back. The Constitution says there shall be no religious test to hold a public office under the United States, except when you're being questioned by Kamala Harris. It's unconscionable for a U.S. senator to suggest that a person's religion should disqualify him from public service. If the United States is truly meant to separate church and state, it's likewise antithetical to the ideals upon which our country was founded to suggest that a person's faith should be a detriment. The First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Yet Harris and Hirono stated that a federal nominee must renounce his religious beliefs in order to be confirmed. There is deep irony to the choice of vice presidential candidate who professes such open anti-Catholic beliefs, since Biden has tried to position himself as a devout Catholic. Biden and the media have used this line to defend Biden against attacks from President Trump for Biden's pro-abortion and anti-religious freedom stances. Biden even released an ad entitled Faith, which tries to paint him as a faithful Catholic. So a nice pairing here. I guess there's something there for everybody. Harris, who would say, you know, if you're going to be in the Knights of Columbus, I don't think you could be a federal judge. I suspect, I don't know, but I think Judge Duenas was a member of the Knights of Columbus. Seems like that's somewhere in the dark recesses of my memory. And members of the Knights of Columbus are pillars of our local community here. It's not some kind of a neo-Marxist subterfuge. So Harris says you can't be in the Knights of Columbus. Biden says, you know, I'm a really loyal Catholic, I think. And I've been a Catholic all my life. Now, I have another article here that ran in the Federalist, and it says that Biden was denied Holy Communion when he attended Mass in South Carolina on a campaign stop due to his pro-abortion positions. So I guess the theory of the Biden campaign is if you're pro-Catholic, you really like the nominee. If you're not, you'll really like the vice presidential nominee. If you really value hypocrisy, you're going to like both of them. Okay, so much for Kamala Harris. Let me see what I got next on the card here.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Doing real estate since 1978. 14 years here on Guam. Call Maria Miller from Horizon Properties at 777-7792.
Okay, next item on a card here is gambling versus Guam, and this has been on the card for quite a while. I hadn't gotten to it earlier, but this is an article from the Daily News. Saipan casino contractor executives indicted in alleged illegal worker scheme. Chinese executives of the Imperial Pacific International and MCC International Saipan contracted to build a large hotel and casino in Saipan face multiple criminal charges in federal court, which were made public on Tuesday. Federal prosecutors allege in their three names, Mr. Wu, Mr. Peter Wu, Mr. Zhu, and Mr. Shi used criminal labor practices during the construction of the Grand Mariana Casino Hotel and Resort and transferred over $24 million to the United States to promote illegal activity. Imperial Pacific and other contractors chose to import nearly all of their employees from China instead of hiring U.S. citizens or otherwise eligible foreign nationals, the indictment stated. Imperial Pacific's number of workers' visas was limited to several hundred by the Department of Homeland Security. Starting in 2015, Wu and Zhu pressured contractor MCC International to speed up the work, threatening to impose fines if the contractors didn't meet the deadlines. As part of the pressure, Wu and Zhu and another conspirator implicitly and explicitly ordered MCC to hire unauthorized alien workers referred to informally as Haigong, Mandarin for black worker. No, boy. That's just bad for two reasons, right? I think it means something from someone from China, but I don't think it means African-American worker. The indictment alleges Wu and Zhu hired workers who were living in the CNMI illegally and encouraged and told MCC to import workers from China using the CP program. Under that program, Chinese nationals can enter the CNMI for business or pleasure only for 45 days, but cannot work. Wu, Zhu, and Shi are accused of instigating a plan to deceive U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, but instructing the prospective hires in China to lie to immigration inspectors. Part of the conspiracy included providing costumes to these people. and backstories to the hired workers and pairing them with female employees in China. The indictment stated the females posed as spouses or girlfriends in exchange for paid vacations to the CNMI. Imperial Pacific reimbursed MCC and other contractors for illegal workers' salaries, bought plane tickets, and paid other expenses. When they arrived in the CNMI, the alien workers illegally received lower wages than legal workers. The scheme lasted through March of 2017 and resulted in an influx of more than 600 illegal workers. The charging document stated the purpose of the scheme was to reduce labor costs, avoid complying with federal labor and immigration laws, and avoid taxes and penalties imposed by the government for violating the law. According to the United States Attorney's Office, all three executives live outside the U.S. and upon their return will be arrested, arraigned, and brought to trial in federal court. The three are indicted on charges of RICO conspiracy, conspiracy to harbor illegal aliens, harboring illegal aliens, unlawful employment of aliens, and international promotion of money laundering. All three executives were indicted in 2019, but the case details were kept confidential until it was unsealed on Tuesday. A really interesting story, but just a really small part of the story. I thought I brought it with me, an article that ran in Bloomberg News during 2018 that really blew the whistle on this whole gambling outfit in the Northern Marianas. And the Bloomberg article alleges all kinds of local corruption. It alleges that more money flowed through a temporary casino than would flow through a casino in Macau, which would be much bigger than a Vegas casino. And basically that the casino operators had taken over in the Northern Marianas. Now, this, for a while, was a wonderful thing for the Northern Marianas because the casino paid a fair amount of money in taxes and other fees. So for a period of time, the Northern Marianas, instead of being dead broke, actually had some money to deal with. Not anymore. Not anymore. With the Wuhan virus and with the feds all over the casino folks, it's not going well for them at all. One day I'll bring in more details and lay this out a little more clearly. But suffice it to say, if you've been following along in the Post as to what's going on with that casino in Saipan, I think it's really good that we pay attention to it and resist the temptation as with all of our might to let such a monster into Guam. Now, I hear people all the time saying, well, you know, what we really need here is legalize casino gambling. We'll really regulate it and keep it on the up and up, but it'll bring in a lot of money that we could use for schools and cops. It just wouldn't work that way. It didn't work that way in Saipan. It didn't even come close. It was like inviting Al Capone into your house because you knew he'd be able to get you lots of beer and wine. It may be so, but the price that you had to pay and the price that they're ultimately going to pay for that casino is going to be pretty extreme. So it's just a caution here that as things are looking kind of dark for us as far as the economy is concerned, we're looking around to see what we could do to introduce some new income into the island. That can't be one of them as far as I'm concerned. Okay, just about running out of topics here. Just about come to the end of the things that I had on the card for today. one more look here. I brought some stuff along here that I thought was kind of interesting, that touches on some of the things that I think are pretty important. So I'm going to just take a minute to read some of these things. Not that I haven't talked about these before, but I have a couple of items that ran in the Daily News. I have an editorial that ran in the Daily News a couple of years ago called Our View. This is when the Daily News used to write editorials. And when you see what this one looks like, you probably have a pretty good idea why they stopped. Our View, time for territories to have full voting rights. Earlier this week, the United States Supreme Court decided not to review a lower court's decision in Segovia versus the United States, a voting rights case involving residents of territories. The lawsuit was filed by Equally American, a group headed by civil rights attorney and former Guam resident Neil Weir. In this case, the group represents veterans and others living in Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands who would be able to vote for president by absentee ballot from Illinois if they lived in other territories or in foreign countries. This requires a little bit of explanation that I'm not going to stop and provide right now, but I will later. The group should be applauded for its efforts to establish federal voting rights for territories. But for voting rights to be meaningful, they should be granted to all eligible adult citizens residing in territories, much like the 23rd Amendment grants voting rights to citizens residing in the District of Columbia. Washington residents who vote for president are represented by electors in the Electoral College. Guam residents who cast ballots for president have no such representation. The right to cast a meaningful vote should not be limited to military veterans or those who have lived in other states. Now, this military veterans is dressing, but it has nothing to do with the Segovia case, for the importance of the Segovia case. But the sentence, the right to cast a meaningful vote should not be limited to those who have lived in other states. In August 2016, a federal judge ruled that the former Illinois residents in the Segovia case did not have the right to cast absentee ballots in that state. The judge said there is no fundamental right to vote in the territories, citing U.S. Supreme Court decisions from 1901 called the Insular cases. In one of those cases, Downs versus Bidwell, the Supreme Court stated if those possessions are inhabited by alien races differing from us in religion, customs, etc., administration of justice according to Anglo-Saxon principles may, for a time, be impossible. Given the clearly racist language and logic, it's disturbing that voting rights should continue to be denied based on the insular cases. It's so wrong. It's hard to read it. It's time for citizens in the territories to be able to vote for president, not through an absentee ballot in a state, but in our own communities, which have been part of the United States for over 100 years. You know, and when a newspaper puts out garbage like this, it's not too hard to understand how some people really are able to go off on a tangent in the wrong direction. Okay, so a few days after that, this appeared in the Daily News. Klitzkie, PDN editorial wrong about insular cases voting rights. Quote, we don't want people who are not confident in their own self-government to be voting on self-government, Mike San Nicolas said. I'm sorry, I'm reading something that doesn't fit here. In response to a Pacific Daily News editorial from October 12, the punchline for a TV comedy show is rather a shallow foundation upon which to build an editorial dealing with a serious subject. The glaringly false statement was uttered by Guam historian Ann Paris Hattori on the TV show called Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Did you see that on TV, Real Joe Cruz?
I didn't, sir.
Everybody else did. Everybody but you. Do you know what that show was like?
No.
That's he's a comedian, kind of like I can't remember the guy's name, but a sarcastic comedian.
Oh, okay.
Commenting on current events. Like, it'll come to me in a minute. And here's what Ann Paris Hattori said. The United States flag is flying over these lands. So some people said, well, doesn't that mean that American laws apply? In 1901, the Insular cases, basically the judgment of the Supreme Court, the new territories were inhabited by quote, alien races, and they may not be able to understand Anglo-Saxon laws. Therefore, the Constitution doesn't have to apply. Now, Ann Paris Hattori is a professor at the university. And what she said is just dead wrong. Hattori, a Guam historian, condensed 147 pages of United States Supreme Court opinion into 38 words and presented that 38-word quote as the ratio decidendi, or rationale or reason for decision, and not the hypothetical obiter dictum that it really was. The three concurring opinions from which the court's ruling was derived employed different rationales which yielded the holding in Downs, none of which relied on the Guam historian Hattori's 38 words to reach a result. Hattori's statement smacks of a degree of sophistry that is perhaps fitting for a TV comic, but not coming from a university professor who we should be able to take seriously. In the key case, S.B. Downs and Company was an importer who sued the collector of customs for New York to recover $659.35 paid in duty for the import of some bananas to George R. Bidwell, a customs collector for New York. Downs, that is the case, turned on the determination of whether the Foraker Act, Puerto Rico's Organic Act, passed constitutional muster. The Downs decision held only that the uniformity clause of the Constitution, which reads, "The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States." That clause is not applicable outside the 47 states that made up the Union at the time. Here's what the holding of the case really said. We are therefore of the opinion that the island of Puerto Rico is a territory appurtenant and belonging to the United States, but not a part of the United States within the revenue clauses of the Constitution. That the Foraker Act is constitutional so far as it imposes duties upon imports from such island, and that the plaintiff cannot recover back the duties exacted in this case. The judgment of the Circuit Court is therefore affirmed. Downs dealt with customs duties, not voting, and not with the inapplicability of the Constitution in Puerto Rico, etc., due to the presence of, quote, alien races therein. Now, this is the kind of demagoguery that you hear from, what's our friend Jesse Limtiaco? He trotted that one out one time. The alien races wordage is obiter dictum, doesn't apply to Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Philippines, or Guam, and is stated only hypothetically. Inability of residents of the territories does not stem from the insular cases, as were inability of residents of territories to vote, does not stem from the insular cases, but from the design of the American Republic, where civil rights have a national dimension, but political rights arise from residents in one of the 50 states. Voting rights in national elections is not unavailable because of the insular cases. The Daily News' statement, quote, given the clearly racist language and logic, it's disturbing that voting rights continue to be denied based on the insular cases, is not only dead wrong, but is very similar to arguments that attempt to gaslight Guam's position in the American system in order to enhance argument for a Guam that is independent of the United States. Okay, we're coming down to the home stretch here.
Wow, nice smile. So perfect and all.
Thanks. I owe it all to Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team. They do wonders for a healthy, happy mouth.
Got teeth? Don't wait until they hurt. Schedule your routine checkup and cleaning with Dr. Yang and his Smile Team. Suite 119 in the East West Business Center, Upper Tumon. Call 647-8702 or 3.
The best thing that happened to teeth since toothpaste.
Dr. Yang and his Smile Team.
They make smiles happen.
People of Guam for 10 amazing years. In celebration of their 10th anniversary, Mezcla Dos will be offering 20% off on all burgers for a limited time only. Terms and conditions apply. Please call them at 646-6295 for more information, or visit them at their Upper Tumon location, right across Kmart. Thank you, Guam, for making Mezcla Dos one of your favorite hamburger spots.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to finish up this this letter that I sent to the editor correcting their erroneous editorial. The Pacific Daily News statement, given the clearly quote, given the clearly racist language and logic, it's disturbing that voting rights continue to be denied based on the insular cases, close quote, is not only dead wrong, but is very similar to arguments that attempt to gaslight Guam's position in the American system in order to enhance argument for a Guam that is independent of the United States. Numerous myths sounding in identity politics, for instance, we are second-class citizens, we are statutory, not constitutional citizens. Because of the insular cases, we can't vote for president. There are only 3 options for decolonization of the island, and that Gov Guam is working towards decolonization, and the one that you just published. These are all myths. Given the clearly racist language and logic, it's disturbing that voting rights continue to be denied is one of those myths. This is a crucial time in the political development of Guam, given that we live in a time when serious discussions concerning nationalism, statehood, self-determination, patriotism, national defense, self-government, racism, decolonization, home rule, hegemony, etc., require serious discussion. None of us is well served by the mythic distractions grounded in identity politics. I have higher hopes for the Pacific Daily News, which I've pretty much abandoned since, well, at least they're not writing wrong editorials anymore like this one. Okay, so we are on the home stretch here. Still got 6 more minutes till the end of the show. So I'm going to just cruise over the Facebook posts and see if there are some gems of wisdom there that I might capitalize on. I've got Tanya Toybe is back saying hello. And Ken Brown, who's watching from Northern California. Glad to have you on board, Ken. And let's see here. Ken says, I'm starting a Bob Klitzkie show watch party on my Facebook news feed. Good call, Ken. Good going. And Pam Duvall, who is a regular, what was it that Pam Duvall's granddaughter said on the Ray Gibson show the other day, Real Joe?
She just said names, sir. The names of you and Ray and Lana, yeah.
Well, that was a nice kid, right?
Yeah.
Very intelligent.
Very.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Brad Hewitt. He posts a freedom versus fiefdom, and Tanya says, let's see here. I think I got a phone call coming in, Real Joe. Nope, you're just playing with the keyboard with the phone, huh?
No.
Okay. And I already read Brad's comment. And Brad says, sounds like opening up the screws will be a boon for the economy. And God forbid that that were to occur. He's being a little sarcastic there, I guess. And then Tanya says, how can they compare bars to schools? And Brad Hewitt says, unfortunately, a lot of idiots bring alcohol to the schoolhouse. And Tanya says, yeah, this is true also. Lee Weber says, you missed prosecutor class. Talking about me, I missed prosecutor class because when I went to law school, we had this old-fashioned idea that a prosecutor's job was to prosecute people who had been arrested for committing crimes. Things are so different now. And let's see who else have I got here. Paul Zanoni, Albert Eliasson says, country is going to hell in a handbasket. I've said that myself on more than one occasion. Richard Clark says, not sure, but a handbasket must be involved somewhere. And let's see, Carrie Augustine. Have they cleared the accident in East Agania? I give up. John Paris, more of BK, please. Someone with a sense of speaking some truth. Well, I try to speak as much truth as I know. Pam Duvall, absolutely, Judge. Are we being punished because the gov and the lieutenant governor are infected? Interesting thought. And Pam Duvall says, you mean Kulasa Harris. And then Pam says, well, here we are, the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. I'll see you then.